This happened almost a decade ago when I was 13 years old. I remember my friend and I were excited about our first time trick-or-treating without our parents. We lived in a small town where nothing ever happens, and we thought it would be the same that night. It started like any other Halloween night. We collected candy, ran into many of our classmates, and had a lot of fun. At 8 p.m. we realized we had to head home. But on the way back, we dropped by our teacher's house. She wasn't home, and the street didn't have many streetlights. To add to this, most of the houses had their lights turned off and their Halloween decorations were taken down. My friend and I were slightly spooked and disappointed by the lack of candy. We wanted to get out of the street as soon as possible. That's when a man emerged from under one of the few streetlights. It was a police officer. Neither of us seemed to notice him before this, possibly due to the darkness. He startled us, but he seemed very friendly. The cop introduced himself and pointed to an inconspicuous bungalow. He said that an older man living in that house was inviting trick-or-treaters inside. Someone called the police, but when he arrived, no one was answering the door. He kept telling us his police car and partner were just around the block. We looked around, but we couldn't see them. I was a pretty paranoid kid. Growing up, my mom loved watching crime shows, and she would always tell me tidbits of lessons. One of these was a story about fake cops. Although I don't remember the details, I remember people can pretend to be police officers to gain trust. Throughout this whole exchange, I was terrified. His lack of badge, police car, and partner did not feel right. I was also conflicted because he was smiling and seemed like he just wanted to help. That was until we heard his strange request. He said that he needed to speak to this potential predator and needed our help. Since we were young girls, this man would answer if we knocked. The officer claimed he would hide behind the bushes next to the front door. He would wait for him to invite us in, jump out, and catch him red-handed. At that moment, I knew my friend felt the same way I did. We both fell silent, but one of us managed to ask if we could discuss. The cop said yes, but we had limited time. The street was silent, and he could hear everything. I remember the feeling of wanting to say something but fearing he would just hear us and escalate the situation. We just stared at each other for what felt like forever. The cop was getting increasingly impatient and told us we had to decide quickly, but then a family came down the street and noticed the officer. They were coming over to see what was happening. That's when the cop said that he would be right back and not to go anywhere. My friend and I scrambled to collect our thoughts and decided to run away. We sprinted out of the street and didn't look back. On our way home, we discussed theories that ranged from him being a fake cop, him playing a prank on us, or him being a real cop, but we misunderstood the situation. When we told our parents, we downplayed it a lot and doubted our experience. In the end, we didn't call the police, but our dads drove to the house and the area around the house. No cop cars or police officers were in sight. Over the years, I can say I regret not calling the police. At the time, my friend and I were convinced we misunderstood what happened. We even told our class the next day, and most, including our teacher, thought it was not alarming. Looking back, I find it extremely strange a police officer would put two children in such a potentially dangerous situation, moreover, with our parents not present. I wonder what his motives were, but it will, unfortunately, remain unsolved. I was huge on costumes. This night, my mother drove my sister and I to this mini strip mall where a discount clothing store had just opened maybe 3 months prior. The reason I call it a mini strip mall is because the only other open businesses were a Sally's beauty store and a Marshall's. It was a last-minute trip, and it was easily 8:30 or 9 p.m. or later, so the Sally's was closed and both the Marshall's and the clothing store were going to be closing within the hour. That being said, this clothing store was surprisingly massive once you got inside, and for Halloween, they decorated the place wall to wall with really cool decorations and costumes. It was very easy to get separated from your group in a place this big, as it had many tall rows that were nearly impossible to see over. Shortly after my family and I entered the store, one of the workers in the dressing room section put on a skeleton mask and jumped out from behind a rack of clothes, frankly scaring the crap out of me and me only. My mom and sister, of course, had a great laugh and separated from me to go shopping on their own. I know it was in good humor, so I go looking for a costume of my own. I had a serious addiction to my MP3 player during this time, and had my headphones in while I was browsing, but I kept getting this chill on the back of my neck because it felt like I was being watched or followed. At some point, I took out one of my earbuds and turned down the music, and I heard the creepiest whistling noise. There were a few other families in the store shopping, so I told myself I was being paranoid, but I went to find my family anyway. They tell me that they're going to go a few doors down to Marshall's and shop there before they closed, and that I was welcome to keep costume shopping at this store, and to just come find them when I was done. My mom gave me like $20 and she and my sister left while I continued shopping. The feeling that I was still being watched and followed never left. I eventually started looking under the clothing racks as I walked, and I saw a dirty pair of black sneakers on either side of me more than once. However, I never saw this person's face. At this point, I knew I wasn't finding a costume there, and was starting to leave the store to walk to Marshall's to find my family. I distinctly remember hearing the footsteps not far behind me at all as I'm leaving, even weaving between different aisles like I was. My heart starts beating fast at this point, because I know I'm not imagining it anymore. I ran track in middle school, so I was able to pick up my pace pretty smoothly without losing my breath. The footsteps behind me did not falter. It wasn't until I was out of the store that I finally turned around and looked at who was following me. I remember my heart freezing when I saw him. It was a white male, probably no more than 35 years old, dressed in all black, with his hoodie up, and just staring straight at me. He didn't have any bags, so he clearly wasn't shopping there, and while I'm staring at him and making eye contact, he doesn't stop following me. In fact, it looked like he was even smirking. Looking back on this, I wanted to hit myself for not screaming for help then and there, but sheer terror just locked my vocal cords. I immediately turned back around and broke out into a sprint. The Marshall's was several doors down and a good running distance from the original clothing store, but I'm not slowing down at all because I can hear this guy running behind me and how hard he's breathing to keep up with me. This guy was determined. I remember making literal whimpers when I realized he was gaining on me a lot faster than I was expecting. I was terrified that he would snatch me in this dark, mostly empty strip mall, and that I would never be able to get to my family in time. A last-minute burst of strength got me through the Marshall's automatic doors, but to my literal horror, this guy runs in the store after me. We're both still going full speed, and my brain hasn't stopped to think of anything besides run at this point. Luckily, I was as tiny as I was quick on my feet, because last minute I jumped between two revolving stands with cell phone cases and headphones, and I knew he wouldn't be able to jump through because of his size. He literally shoves one of his arms through the gaps and lunges at me and tries to grab the back of my shirt. Luckily for me, he makes a lot of noise doing so, and more people in the store start to look over. I haven't stopped running at this point, and I had no plans to, and by the time I find my mom, I'm babbling and sweating and crying, and the last thing I see of the man is him making a quick retreat from the store. To this day, my mom and sister think I'm still over-exaggerating this story. They firmly think it was a prank played by the man working at the store with the skeleton mask, and I hate that that even happened because it really discredited my story and fear to them. The man working at the store with the skeleton mask was a teenage boy with a bright red uniform shirt. The man that stalked and almost successfully kidnapped me was a grown man who had the most terrifying atmosphere I'd ever been around. There's many things I wish I had done differently, but to this day, I just thank my lucky stars that I was small and quick enough to evade him. I didn't have my cell phone that day either because I had gotten into some trouble, so if I had been taken, there would have been virtually no way to find me.